France, an expanse of wilderness reaching from Newfoundland to the Gulf of Mexico, had its first permanent settlement in the village of Quebec, Canada, in 1608. Jesuit priests soon arrived, imbued with a passion to convert the Native Americans to Christianity. The Jesuits were not alone in their evangelistic zeal. In 1639, sisters from the Order of St. Ursula, started in the 1500s by Angela Merici, traveled from France to Quebec to help teach the native people. This was not unusual for the Ursuline sisters, who had allowed students into their cloistered life in Europe, teaching and winning converts to Catholicism. So began a continuous commitment of Ursulines to educating young girls in America. In 1666, René Robert Cavelier Sieur de la Salle, a Frenchman educated for a Jesuit life, traveled to Canada for priestly service, but soon redirected his ambitions to a search for the mouth of the Mississippi River. He accomplished his goal in 1682 and named the entire river basin south of today's Memphis, Tennessee, La Louisiane, in honor of King Louis XIV. Within 50 years, La Louisiane would provide a field for missionary work, adventure, and independence for the Ursulines. It would also allow them to pursue their belief that mothers are children's first and most important teachers, and that for women to teach, they must be educated and empowered. In the 1690s, King Louis XIV funded the expeditions of Canadian brothers Jean-Baptiste Le Moyne, Sieur de Bienville, and Pierre Le Moyne, Sieur de Iberville, to protect French interests along the Gulf of Mexico. In 1718, Bienville established a settlement on the high ground at the turn of the Mississippi, the village of Nouvelle-Orléans. When the need arose for a military hospital in the village, French Ursulines answered the call. It was not their desire to run a hospital, but to teach. But they seized the opportunity to travel to New France with adventurous spirit. In February 1727, accompanied by 3 Jesuit priests, 12 women religious were hoisted in ropes to the deck of the Gironde. The women shared one tiny partitioned area, and despite slow winds, rough seas, threatening pirate ships, and seasickness, the women assisted in the celebration of the Mass every day of the voyage. 5 months later, they reached the mouth of the Mississippi, only to be put aboard 2 pirogues and a sloop for the week-long journey upriver to New Orleans. As Sister Stanislaus reported, it must be acknowledged that all of the fatigues of the Gironde were not comparable to those which we had in this short passage. In the pre-dawn hours of August 6, 1727, Mother St. Augustine, Marie Tranchampin, and her companions, wet and dirty and swollen with mosquito bites, disembarked and were led to their first residence, the Collie House in the southwest corner of town. The nuns soon began religious and academic lessons for young girls in New Orleans, the first educational institution for women in the United States. It had been the nuns' desire to teach the Native Americans, but they quickly adapted their mission to educate the daughters of the French colonists, female enslaved children, and free females of color. The work of the nuns was endless, running the school, tending to boarders, conducting religious activities, maintaining the facility, caring for the sick, and performing clerical and procurement duties. They took in children when their parents died, including victims of the Natchez Indian attack on Fort Rosalie, becoming one of the first orphanages in the country. They also sheltered abused wives. In 1734, their convent was completed, and a celebratory procession of 7 nuns, clergy, young girls, and citizens moved through the muddy streets to their new home. As their new convent was adjacent to the hospital, the Ursulines were required to honor their contract, and they transformed a dirty, inefficient facility into a highly functioning hospital. Sisters St. Francois Xavier, Charlotte Hebert, who ran the hospital successfully, had knowledge of medicinal plants and became the first female pharmacist in the Mississippi Valley. Meanwhile, their new convent was falling into decay. Plans began for a new home on the same grounds, and in 1752 they inhabited their new convent within the enclosure of the first building. In 1760, one of the original arrivals, Sister St. Stanislaus Hachard, died in her sleep. Her 5 letters to her father, first published in 1728, gave a uniquely feminine and youthful perspective of this amazing adventure. In 1763, the sisters would experience a new challenge. With the end of the 7 Years' War between England and France, it was revealed that the defeated French had secretly given a portion of the region, including New Orleans, to the Spanish, so that the British could have no claim. During the period of Spanish influence, the Ursulines, fearing they would lose their French traditions, had to appeal to the Spanish king for more French nuns. While one of the French nuns waited for his decision, she found a discarded statue of the Blessed Virgin in her convent. The nun named the statue Sweetheart and carried her to New Orleans when the king agreed. In the Great New Orleans Fire of 1788, Sweetheart was held up to the fire and the convent was spared. Political turmoil in Europe and the fledgling United States would play havoc with the colony once again. President Thomas Jefferson's Louisiana Purchase in 1803 created a new level of anxiety among the people of New Orleans and the Ursulines. During these troubling times, the Ursulines took two important actions. They wrote to President Jefferson, asking for some assurance of their property and rights, to which he responded, "Be it assured, it will meet all the protection my office can give it." They took steps to secure new French recruits for their convent, but Napoleon Bonaparte's rampage against Catholics had sent religious into hiding. Nevertheless, in 1803, Sister Saint Andre located her cousin, Sister Saint Michel, in Montpellier, and beseeched her to come to New Orleans. It would take several years, but Sister Michel received Pope Pius II's authorization in 1809. She had prayed before a statue of Mary, promising to have the Blessed Mother honored in New Orleans. She commissioned a statue in the name of Our Lady of Prompt Succor, and it traveled with Sister Michel and her 7 companions to New Orleans in 1810. The tension between England and the United States over the Louisiana Purchase escalated into the War of 1812. In December 1814, their victory at the Battle of Lake Borgne, just south of New Orleans, gave motivation to American General Andrew Jackson. He began warning the citizens of New Orleans, asking for the prayers of the Ursulines. On the evening of January 7, 1815, women, children, and old men gathered in terror at the Ursuline convent as the nuns prayed to Our Lady of Prompt Succor. Mother St. Marie promised an annual Mass of Thanksgiving if the battle was won. The next morning, Mass was offered by Father Dubourg at the altar on which the statue of Our Lady had been placed. Before the Mass was completed, a courier entered the chapel saying, "Victory is ours." In spite of the fact that the British outnumbered the Americans 4-1, 2 events led to General Jackson's victory. First, the morning fog had lifted, exposing the British to deadly American fire. And second, a commander had forgotten the ladders necessary to cross the American trench and embankment. Were these coincidences or divine intervention? The people of New Orleans have always considered the victory at Chalmette as bordering on the supernatural. After the battle, Jackson came to the convent to thank the nuns for their prayers. In the years after, when he was in New Orleans, he always visited the Ursuline convent. In a letter to Father Dubourg, General Jackson called the prayers of the Ursulines a signal interposition of heaven, and he asked him to order a service of public thanksgiving to be performed in the cathedral in token of the great assistance we have received from the ruler of all events, and our humble sense of it. To this day, a Mass is held every January 8th at the Ursuline Shrine of Our Lady of Prompt Succor in thanksgiving for the deliverance of New Orleans. Since 1727, in our great city of New Orleans, the Ursulines have changed hearts. Each day they fulfill a missionary's dream, and they continue to live their lives and lead their students to control their own fate. Their love of God and their unrelenting care for others have bestowed 300 years of blessings on this place and her people. Serve Him, they will serve.